It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung.
It was sung by immigrants as they struck out to distant shores, pioneers who pushed westward against unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
It was the call of workers organized, women who reached for the ballots, a president who chose the moon as our new frontier, and a king who took us to the...
On the 9th of October, 2017, the Monday Morning Quarterback on WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network, and various other outlets from east to west. We'll start off today with the DJ Trump tax plan. There's an article here in the Post by Dr. Larry Summers, who at one time was the president of Harvard, and he was a principal economist in the Clinton administration, chair of the economic advisors there. To spotlight this tax plan or lack thereof, we'll also be looking at the playoffs, what the odds are, etc., and we'll spend a little bit of time with the current NFL protests, the statement from the Players Union, as it is known. They recognize that they are part of the labor movement, and also statements from the Dallas newspaper, the owner, Jerry Jones. So let's start off with Larry Summers, and we'll get to where things are here. The Trump administration tax plan is not a tax plan. It is a melange of ideas put together without precision or arithmetic. It's not clear enough to permit the kind of careful quantitative analysis of its expected budget costs and economic effects, distributional implications that precede such legislation in a serious country. Now, what this is shaping up with this administration, we see a lot of third-rate efforts going on here. As before, we talked about the generals, a bunch of generals around there that have been in military service for 40 years and have never won a war. When you get this sort of third-rate activity, nothing productive can come of it. That's the problem right there. It is clear enough, however, to demonstrate that the claims of Steve Mnuchin, the and National Economic Council Director Cohen, and Council of Economic Advisors Hesed, are a combination of ignorant, disingenuous, and dishonest. Hesed, whose job is to stand up for the rigorous apolitical economic analysis, has the temerity last week to accuse the Tax Policy Center. We've went over some of their analysis here, staffed by many of the most distinguished tax analysts in the country, of issuing a scientifically indefensible fiction. He and his colleagues should look in the mirror. I have strong disagreements on policy. This is Larry Summers speaking, with various people. Martin Feldstein, he's been around. Glenn Hubbard, we talked about him. He's at Columbia. Nothing I have ever heard or read from them seems absurd and dishonest in the way that almost everything coming out of this administration does. We know enough to say that tax reform plans along the line of the administration sketched out would not substantially increase economic growth, would blow out the budget deficit, would make the U.S. even more on an unequal place. Well, that's the design. The administration pushes the idea that somehow cutting the corporate tax rate would be a huge spur to investment. It's certainly possible with a lower tax rate. Accountants would locate more tax income in the U.S., but a spur in investment seems unlikely with after-tax long-term interest rates well below 2%. business able to write off investments immediately. Capital costs has never been lower than that. True, there's much cash parked overseas, but almost all corporations have done so. Also have cash hoards in the U.S. In other words, there's a lot of cash these corporations have. That's why they're buying back their own stocks, etc. The first order of effect of the Trump administration, what he terms territorial system, that renounces a U.S. Tax claim to oversee corporate income, would encourage relocation of productive activities to tax haven jurisdictions, slowing U.S. growth. It should not be forgotten that the most rapid gross domestic product growth achieved in the U.S. took place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when the top tax rate was twice as high. Rates were surely too high, and the punitive rates would be a huge mistake in the current context. But it's absurd to suggest that reductions in the current level will call for some renaissance of hard work, just as likely as people who feel richer will reduce their efforts. What about the budget deficit? That's an interesting subject there, because usually progressives, liberals, etc., had not talked about the budget deficit as much. The tax cuts that pay for themselves, as Mnuchin sometimes asserts, would happen. They would have to be massive increases in growth. That's not going to happen because you have an internationalized economy, a global economy. Because this is unlikely, this would bloat the budget deficit at a time when we should be preparing for the next downturn, for raising entitlement costs and potentially the need for increased national security spending. But worse than that, many of the administration orbits have expressed the belief that the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing program has inflated asset prices by absorbing long-term bonds. If this logic is correct, increasing the supply of bonds to fund large increases in the deficit that tax cuts would entail should have a significant depressing effect on asset prices and the economy. Any possible supply-side benefits of a tax program would have to be weighed against this dumping impact. Finally, there is a question of fairness, and that's really something they're not interested in. The immediate impact of corporate tax cut is to help corporations, that the vast majority of shareholders are concentrated among the top tier, that's at 1% to 2%. Cohen's argument that the corporate tax would benefit firefighters' pension funds, as he must know, is disingenuous. Such fund benefits are promised and not dependent on performance of the market. Mnuchin and Hassett's arguments about investments depend on the false premise that domestic investment will be spurred by corporate taxes, and anyone in doubt about such fairness questions should note that the administration is not willing to do what previous treasuries have been willing to do, present a revenue and distribution analysis of the plan. Well, they don't have one because they really don't have a plan. This week, World Finance Ministers, central bankers will gather in Washington. That's the International Monetary Fund World Bank meeting. These meetings will be at a time when the U.S. urges other countries to respect the laws of economic and arithmetic in formulating economic policies. This time, the lecture should go in the opposite direction. There is no doubt about this. Another interesting thing, this is from Dr. Samuelson. He's at Austin, I believe, where he was. An economist, the spoils system is a phrase I coined some years to illustrate the basic problem of wealthy societies, including, of course, the U.S. after our annual gross domestic product is approaching $20 trillion. The problem is that as societies become richer, so does the temptation for people to advance their economic interests by gobbling someone else's wealth as opposed to creating it. Well, no doubt becomes an increasingly predatory situation. The resulting distributive struggles all the time as part of the social fabric. Divorced couples fight over marital assets. Congress debating who should or should not get tax cuts, credit, Social Security. Say Social Security lawyers launch class actions to remedy the wrongs, patent trolls, etc. Regardless of where your sympathies lie, the distribution is both good and bad. What connects all these activities and many others is that they don't result in production of goods and services. That's the same issue that came up in the UK. We were talking about that on Numbers Man. Those recall the spirit of the 19th century. The politicians' defense of patronage jobs, to the victor goes the spoils. Well, yeah. This is a sort of economy may be larger than you think. The gist of the provocative new book, Capture Economy, by let's see here, Lindsay and Stephen Tells, the political science at Johns Hopkins University. They argue that the economy is ridden with self-serving arrangements, mainly benefiting the rich, that impose excess costs on the poor and middle class and reduce economic growth. Take housing, restrictive zoning arrangements drive up housing prices. That's from Lindsay and Tells, citing Harvard University economist Edward Glassner and his collaborators. In some areas, scarce housing has resulted in huge premiums in housing price, 20% in Washington and Boston, and 30% in Los Angeles, 50% in Manhattan, San Francisco, and San Jose. Zoning exists to transfer wealth from new buyers to existing owners. That is from Lindsay and Company's right, but this is not the end of the story. Exorbitant real estate prices in many booming regions discourage people from moving in. Houses are too expensive. This reduces overall economic growth. Fewer people can take advantage of the available opportunities. And consider occupational licensing. That has been talked about by various people to reduce quote-unquote red tape. Retirement that the requirement, that some jobs be certified. In 1970, only 10% of the jobs required licenses. And according to Lindsay and Tells, now the share is at 30% across all states. Some 1,100 occupations subject to licensing, including barbers, manicures, animal trainers. California is the leader with 177. Although the usual justification is consumer protection, the actual effect of licensing is to restrict competition and raise prices. No doubt about that out there. The overlapping between these sectors, productive goods and services, are often sold at artificially higher prices that don't add a value. You'll hear much of that in the business world about adding a value to a product or a service. This simply shifts wealth from buyer to seller, and at worst, this is economic cannibalism. Economists call the artificially high price of rents, not to be confused with what tenants pay their landlords. The message from Lindsay and Tells is that rents are more widespread than most people imagine. The pursuit of rents is a big part of the spoil system, and can anything be done about it? It'll be hard. Most of the offending arrangements are technical and obscure, and the people who benefit from them could care less, obviously, there. And in all fairness, it's also worth acknowledging that up to this point, these distributive conflicts are unavoidable and even desirable. Every modern nation has them, and either through governmental intervention or the private market. People will fight over getting a bigger piece of the economic pie, which means somebody else will get a smaller piece. Well, actually, that is factual to a point in this society, as old Sarah Palin calls it, crony capitalism. We talked about on the open source report. Oracle ranting and raving about open source in governmental software procurement and in governmental IT departments, and the hiring of people from Silicon Valley to replace them. What happened with the Affordable Care and the healthcare.gov site. The likes of Oracle and various other dinosaurs attempted to do the site. That most of them opposed in the first instance. They sabotaged it, made an utter disruption of the whole healthcare system, conveyed to people that things would not work. They were replaced by people that knew exactly what they were doing, that had worked at the Facebooks of the world and those kinds of operations, that understood how to use open source type software and tools. Thus, things are running very smoothly. So what happens now? The Trump administration cuts the budget for promotion by 90%. So in other words, by doing that, they create an artificial market for the self-employed and other people, in Medicaid, etc., through the Obamacare site. That is a suppressed enrollment. And then it becomes, or falls upon progressive organizations, particularly progressive broadcasters, to explain to the people and get these dates out when this period will start. I believe it's in October. I think for Medicare it's the 15th of October, very short period there. But when this will actually start and you have to get to the site, always the first day or two accessing these sites is a little cumbersome, but you look at the first week and try the second day and the third day. You should get on and get the business done. But start doing your research now, because it is coming. There's no doubt about that. Let's get to... this is E.J. Dion. We'll save E.J. Well, he's writing here on the mainstreaming of right-wing extremism. I've been reading a book by Cheryl Atchison, a person that was at CBS for many, many years. And somewhere, poor old Cheryl, must have been on a platform somewhere, and fell off and hit her head, because she went from being an investigative journalist, which she still is, to being a spewer of right-wing smears. In fact, wrote a book called Smears. She defines smears as an alternative. In other words, usually when you smear someone, it's just strictly a false statement and you smear that person. But she says smears are, let's put some words in her mouth here, looking at things from a more dialectic point of view, as not being all quote-unquote negative, but being positive and negative. She's redefining that. But in the book, she spends... majority of the book, I think I'm on chapter 4 now, of, or is it 5? Anyway, of talking about Media Matters. Mr. Block, the creator of Media Matters, an associate of Bill and Hillary Clinton, and various other progressive sites, how, quote-unquote, what she calls the smears are put up there. And to sort of mix it up a little there, she talks about the swift boating, but she spends just a page or so on this, what happened with the swift boats and a campaign and brother John Kerry that cost an entire election. And she does touch on William Horton. William Horton, of course, being from Boston. He was known to the people. That was when our own Professor Dukakis was running against the first George H.W. Bush, known as Willie Horton. That was something Republicans dreamed up. They have just not started this fake news situation. Let me just finish this up here. The society, which still exists, enjoyed its heyday in the 1960s and saw communism everywhere. Robert Welch, he used to be, even cast President Eisenhower as a dedicated conscious agent of the Communist Party. He founded the Birch Society. Their successors now, the alt-right people out there, the groups that was so far out that the founder of Modern Conservatism published a 500-word, this is William Buckley. We had William Buckley's interview with Hugh Hefner. The Birches were from the responsible that excommunicated there, and on Ike, Buckley's friend and ally Russell Kurt offered a priceless rapport. Eisenhower was not a communist, he's a golfer. Well, yeah, Ike liked to stay on the links. He's better at it than the President DJ Trump. Tea Party loyalists' observations might bring a chuckle for those who still remember the old Birches. I think maybe some of them are still around. They probably been put out of business by the Tea Party. But it was also telling that why politics has gone haywire. We have our political arguments turned so bitter, and why DJ Trump is able to win the Republican nomination. They call it polarization. The central reason has been the mainstream style of extremist conservative politics. For decades was regarded unacceptable by most of the GOP. But now they're in an extreme situation. Extreme approach is built in on behalf of dreadful conspiracies, hidden motives. It indulges the widest charges aimed at associating political thought with evil and subversive forces. What's striking about the current movement is that in such groundless and reckless accusations has been a routine part of politics. Yes, it has. On Thursday night, Trump sent a typical outlandish tweet peddling by promoting deceit by promoting Ed Gillespie against Democrat Norton. Rep. Norton is in Virginia next month. Rep. Norton is running for governor of Virginia, is fighting for violent MS-13 gangs in sanctuary cities. Vote Gillespie. If the tweet sounds like a desperation, that's because it is. Norton, Lieutenant Governor, has been leading Gillespie by 4 to 6 poll in most polls, some by as much as 10. Democrats ahead of a whopping 13% in the Washington Post Shara School poll released the morning of the tweet. One theory, Trump is trying to rally his enthusiasts to Gillespie to help cut his polling gap, but Trump's ploy could also backfire. Roughly 6 in 10 people in Virginia disapprove of DJ Trump. Tossing out the outrageous absurdity of that moderate, mild-mannered Norton is fighting for a gang whose motto is kill, rap, and control, should be disqualified from any politician who makes it. Anyway, this goes to so much absurdity it doesn't really matter there. The current forms of right-wing duty politics reveal a reversion to the old extremism. It's part and partial of a normal political movement. Now, dark plots are invented out of whole cloths, and they first circulated on websites. And Atchison talks about this, the smear. We'll do a report on her book. Let's see, the Birches saw immunity in the shadows of 18th century as a line behind progressive treason. The new far right uses globalists and epithet that is less obvious and more user-friendly. Well, the old extremists linked all manner of action by its opponents to communism doesn't go very well these days because they know that the Soviet Union has fallen. Authentic conservatives know that extremism is the antithesis of a philosophy devoted to the preservation of free institutions. The extremists hated Eisenhower because he understood this. Although our current commander-in-chief is a golfer, he is otherwise has little in common with I like Ike. There's no doubt about that. Trump is urging the right down a path that leads to nothing but trouble for conservatism, but also for our country. That's E.J. Dion. Let's go to the Dallas We'll go to Dallas paper in a minute to hear. This is about what happened today in Indianapolis with Vice President Pence. And this is why it is a very tenuous situation with the VP Pence. Many people have talked about what if DJ Trump left for one reason or the other. It would be a tragedy because Pence is a true believer, an ultra-right-wing fascist. There's no doubt about that. He left for the 49ers Colts game after on Sunday because of protests by players during the anthem. I'm saying our Vice President of the United States, in his opinion, there was disrespect to the flag. Then he should express himself however he wants. That's what Jones said. He's got the right. He's got rights too, and so however he wants to do. If he felt that not standing for the flag is disrespect, I do too. The Players Association, of course, issued their statement that its members are union members and part of the labor movement that has woven the fabric of America for generations, adding our men and their families are also conscious Americans who continue to be a force for good throughout our communities and have decided to use their platform to peacefully raise awareness to issues that deserve attention. It is a source of enormous pride that some of our best communications about these issues have taken place in locker rooms in a respectful, civil, and thoughtful way that should serve as a model for all who can communicate with each other. The Major League Players Association continues, we should not stifle these discussions, cannot allow our rights to become subservient to the very opinions of our constitutional protests. This is what makes us the land of the free and home of the brave. That was from the NFL Players Association on Twitter. Had originally said the union statement had originally intended for the protests by Pence in Indianapolis, but it could serve for any situation. Jones mentioned requiring the NFL games operation manual that players must be on the sideline for the anthem. The league has said that it will not discipline players. During the national anthem, players on the field, on the bench, should stand in attention, face the flag, hold their helmets, etc. It should point to our players and our coaches. We continue to be judged by the public. Anyway, Jones did take a knee before a picture of Mr. Jones taking a knee before the Arizona game there with his players. It was a positive thing for Jones. Our players want to make statements about unity, and we want to make statements about equality, Jones said in a news conference after the game. They are very much aware that the statements, when made and when attempted to be made in and are a part of the recognition of our flag, cannot be lead to criticism, but can also to controversy. It was really easy for everyone in our organization to see the message of unity, the message of equality was getting, and if you will, push aside and diminish the controversy. We have had the circumstances that was making it into, we have even had the circumstances making it into a controversy. Jones said the whole idea is political and has been incited by politics. But let me be real clear. The thing that the National Football League needs to do, and the Cowboys are going to do, is stand for the flag. That's what we're going to do. We kneeled in support of each other before the national anthem. We stood for the national anthem. The Cowboys pregame demonstration in Arizona was not the only NFL owner. This is Jones. A different approach during the anthem. Early in the day, the Dolphins owner Stephen Ross, who in the past had vocally supported the players' right to protest via the Miami Herald. I think it's incumbent upon the players today, if that's how the public is looking at it, to stand salute the flag. Yes, he's feeling the pressure. From the New York Daily News, Mr. King reported that the players from 7 teams that told him that they have been told they have to stand for the anthem. He cited the Washington team as one such team. Urban and Moore, the Cowboys who raised their fist during the anthem, said that they have no intention of disrespecting the flag of military members. They were speaking to the Fort Worth Star Telegram. My dad's a master sergeant. He's a Marine, and I know what he thinks. He's okay with it, as most Marines I speak to. That's what Mr. Urban said. So there's a history here between the two, and basically the headline here in the Dallas Morning News is Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, any player who disrespects the flag won't be allowed to play. Well, that'll be a union grievance. We know that is coming. This is in Arlington, Texas. Jones is the first NFL owner to publicly make a stand about disciplining players who kneel during the anthem. He didn't specify what kind of demonstration he considered disrespect. So they named 2 players here, Mr. Durante Moore and Mr. David Urban. We already talked about those players. This was a game against Green Bay, which Dallas lost at AT&T Stadium. At the conclusion of the anthem, 2 players raised their fists. I didn't know about that, Jones said. Well, Jones, anyway, they had a 35-31 loss. The reason we were given that score is because we were reporting on it. Jones addressed the media for 22 minutes after the game. He spent the final 7 minutes talking about how he adored the Cowboys and other NFL players should stand for the national anthem. And dozens of players around the league kneeling in the first 5 weeks of the season. Jones' strong stand for respecting the flag was sparked by when he was asked about Pence. Pence took to Twitter to explain but why he left the game suddenly. I left the Colts game today because Trump and I will not dignify any event that disrespects our soldiers' flag and national anthem. It doesn't disrespect the soldiers nor the flag. The national anthem and the flag is the people, and the people are the Constitution. We cannot in the NFL in any way give the impression that we tolerate disrespect the flag, is what Jones said. I'm saying our vice president, in his opinion, there's disrespect to the flag, then he should express it himself however he wants to. He's got rights too. And Jones sounds like he's very doubtful about that. He felt by not standing for the flag is disrespect. The real person disrespecting the flag is Vice President Pence himself. And this administration, by cutting health care, purporting to cut health care for millions of people. That is a disrespect of the American people. The tax plan that benefits the 1% and 2% is disrespecting the American people, which is disrespecting the flag. And no amount of jingoism will cover that up. Urban, who made his season debut Sunday after a 4-game suspension for violating, they're trying to smear him. It's just something that I do. Moore said, this is the substance abuse policy. Moore said he doesn't believe his demonstration is disrespectful to the flag, including a brother who just returned from a tour of duty in Germany. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, Moore says. Who is to say I am right? Who is to say that they are right and I'm wrong? At the end of the day, you do whatever you do, and I know that I'm going to stand up and not disrespect the flag. I don't do anything to cause unwarranted attention during the process. However, I do afterward. I don't feel like it should be a matter, honestly. No Cowboy player had kneeled during the national anthem during the last month, as pressure has mounted across the league with more and more demonstrations. And this is, part of it. Some of the TV stations have actually turned away from that. And Cowboys kneel, and that was in Phoenix with Arizona team there. Trump called Jones after the Cowboys demonstration there and told him that any player in the NFL operation, anyway, forget it. Moore was asked if he ever kneeled for the national anthem in wake of Jones' comments. I don't know what I do when the time comes. There's more, I'm sorry. I do a lot of stuff that is sporadic. So basically that's what would go there. So in other words, then they go to the NFL Players Association's statement, which is there. We've already covered Pence walking out. Now we'll go to our sports package here. And we have to find our sports package. Oh. We'll start off of this with, this is the 538. Trump has killed Obama's biggest policy. Hasn't killed it, but he's making a lot of important changes. And we talked about changes such as to the Affordable Care Act. He announced broader exemptions for the Affordable Care Act mandates requiring employers to offer birth control free of deductions or copay to the workers. Healthcare experts say any new regulation will essentially allow any organization to claim some sort of a contraceptive exemption, violating it, and you get in this religious or moral values, even if it's not a church, religious school, or another clearly religious entity, thus free itself. In other words, it'd be economic. It had originally decided that almost all workers be covered under birth control. They exempted some religious organizations. Early in the day, Beauregard Sessions sent out a formal memo to the Department of Justice workers announcing that the department would no longer interpret the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as applying discrimination against people who are transgender. The memo effectively says that sex discrimination on sex, which the law bars, is about men and women, not sexual identity. That flies in the face of what General Holder did. Again, it's hard to quantify the exact impact of new policies, but we know that the Justice Department under the Trump administration is less eager to defend the civil rights of everyone, not only transgender people. The role in identity politics. Now this comes in here. Democratic voters are more likely than Republican voters to believe that men and women who are transgender face higher levels of discrimination. No doubt about that if people find out about it. Republicans, meanwhile, are more likely than Democrats to believe Christians face discrimination. Christian conservative activists in particular argue that mandates they all contraceptive to workers violates their religious rights. Well, it violates their purse string rights there. This whole religious thing about birth control, abortions, etc., is something created in the back room of GOP consultants to prey on people's raw emotion. But many people have obviously no idea about contraceptives and birth control, which is widespread and accepted in this particular society. Women are on birth control. They will remain on birth control. They will somehow get birth control pills. The whole idea of people abstaining, as the late, great Jerry Pippin used to say, the majority of people, and he was headquartered out in the very red state of Oklahoma, that women that have abortions were these Baptist-type women on the scene. So in other words, a lot of hypocrisy, sort of like the Republican from Pennsylvania that decided to ask a woman to get an abortion, and he was supposedly a big anti-abortion man, period. Let's look at a little polling here from the handling of Maria is getting a really bad marks. This is DJ Trump has been hammered for the response to Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and elsewhere, unlike his reaction to Hurricane Harvey and Irma. Well, Irma and Harvey were in the very red states of Florida and Texas around the Houston area, and impacted a lot of his voters, and particularly the financial exposure in the state of Texas and in Florida around Key West, etc. Whereas when you talk about the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, you're talking about people of color. So there are some polls out here. The latest Associated Press poll found that 32% of Americans approve of Trump's handling of the disasters in the territories, while 49% disapproved. The same survey, 48% approved of his handling in Florida and Texas, just 27% disapproved. Well, that's sort of a story that has moved off the out of the range. Maria seemed to be sliding as more Americans form ratings. On the subject, YouGov poll found 45% of Americans approved the job Trump was doing after Maria, while 31% disapproved this week after news coverage had increased. This is the YouGov poll, dropped to 40% of disapproval at 44%. In other words, the more people hear about it, this is compared to G.W. Bush receiving 44% approval rating and a 50% disapproval rating. That was on Katrina. Some of CBS poll. The good news for Trump is that his approval rating on Maria can drop significantly further, only if his base, and this is the reason you see those kinds of tweets coming out there. His Twitter war with Senator Coker of Tennessee, where Coker responded that they need adult care at the White House. His disapproval rating on Maria amongst voters that voted for Hillary Clinton was 87%. Other poll nuggets, as they call it here, MSNBC has written Trump bashing to an all-time record there. I suppose so. I don't have cable. They don't have a TV. Anyway, they have a similar percentage of viewers who identify as liberal Democrats, 26% at CNN, I wonder why, and 30% at MSNBC. The Fox audience, meanwhile, may as well represent a different planet. 10% of the viewers call themselves liberal Democrats, and why? Well, 43% call themselves conservative Republicans. I thought it would be 83%. Doug Jones has a shot in Alabama. Well, we looked at these two polls, Opinion Savvy and JMC Analytics, in the runoff between 6 and 8%. But part of the problem is that you have to do the 6 or 8% in roughly a month, a little less than a month, and that is a tall order. They haven't been able to elect a Democrat, or in fact a very conservative Democrat, in 20 years in Alabama. And let's see, the Vegas shooting here, YouGov poll on it. Most Americans don't think gun control would work. After the killing, only 40% think stricter gun laws would reduce it. 41% think Congress should take some action. NRA, incidentally, on the bumper stocks, they decided that it could be modified, but they're still in favor of bumper stocks. So, effectively, what they're doing is the same thing DJ Trump has done on the Dreamers. He's decided that he wants his wall and various other restrictions which sabotage any kind of agreement he could get with the Democrats, Chuck Schumer and Nancy. We did a show on Chuck and Nancy, and they were moving along on an agreement, but part of what Trump doesn't quite understand is in the election he had a stream of consciousness campaign. You cannot do that in the White House, because once you put in motion agreements or policies, you must follow through with them. I didn't say could, I said must. Or you will not have any more type of negotiation. You will just go as he did with the Affordable Care Act, willy-nilly. Still trying to get that done. It's not going to happen. You're not going to put millions of people out of health care. And if you do it, you prepare a bloodbath, literally, for 2018 and 2020 in many other districts. Now, granted, there are districts that are so red it probably will not make a difference. But there are a few districts in the Senate and a few in the House, very few, that are very tenuous. We're looking at Arizona and the position of Senator McCain, who is terminally ill now, and Jeff Flake there, his situation there, and Heller in Nevada. So there could be some changes within the Senate, no doubt about that. So Democrats and Republicans are moving further apart. There's no doubt about that. They look to the Pew, only 4% of Republicans were more liberal than the medium Democrat, while 5% of Democrats were more conservative than the medium Republican. So there's that polarization is there. 43% of respondents rate the economy's extreme are good. That was in a CNBC poll. That's called the All-American Economic Survey. In North Carolina, 75% of registered voters think Trump should cut a deal with the Democrats. The Elon University poll there. 63% of American adults, it's best if the U.S. Play an active role in world affairs. That's for the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Not many people have heard of them. Half the country thinks the government is doing too many things that are better left to individuals and business. 45% that's from a Gallup poll from ABC. Let's see. If you're going to quote ABC here, the open-ended, okay. The 10 most common words respondents gave were incomplete, arrogant, strong, idiots, and so forth. On, I guess some words. Washington Post found a larger lead there for Nathan. Ed Gillespie, 53-40. That's a poll there. These polls are kind of all over the place. Marxist University, well, Bill de Blasio crushing, of course, his Republican. Nicole Malatakis, the 16%. Well, you just don't want to forget about that. And we'll just leave it at that. Let's go back to the scores. We'll do the scores last night. The Astros were in Fenway Park. Red Sox 10-3 in that contest. They had to be 10-3. The Astros lead the series 2-1. So they will have a deciding game 3, the best 3 out of 5. And in New York, Cleveland was shut out by the Yankees. Mr. Chapman got the save there. So another 2-1 situation. The next game, they will both Boston and the Yankees will have to win to tie this thing up. Let's look at. We'll do the odds last. Wait a minute here. Well, basically looking at. Wait a minute here. Where are we? Oh, here we go. Preseason predictions here. And these are percentages. This is from the 538. The Red Sox here, the Astros a 53% chance of winning a division. Boston at 47%. That is how they're set up. The Nationals and the Cubbies. The Nationals have 48%. They actually have the Cubbies at 52%. I thought it was very interesting there. As Mr. Scherzer versus Quintana, yeah. For the Cubs, that'll be game 3 there. And that series is 1-1. It's okay. Cleveland and the Yankees. Cleveland at 48%. The Yankees at 42%. A game 3. Should go to game 4. No, I guess we're actually game 4. Yeah, it will be game 4. On Tuesday, we have the Nationals and the Cubs. The Cubs at 54 and the Nationals at 46. And the other one, the Dodgers and D-backs in Arizona. Dodgers at 51, D-backs at 49. And on Wednesday, the Red Sox and Astros. It's all Red Sox here. 60% chance of winning in a Game 5. If there's a Game 5, 40% there. And basically the same thing. Cleveland's at 67% if there's a Game 5, and only 37% there. So there we are. And this is a National League. Cubs and Nationals. The Nationals are slated at 54%, Cubs at 40% if there's a Game 5. And the Dodgers at 63% and the D-backs at only 37% if there is, and that would be on the 12th of October. So we are looking at Monday. I guess we'd have Game 3. Yeah, Game 3 of the American League Series on Monday if rain does not rain them out. Basically, it's the same thing here. The World Series, the odds are 9-4. We won't go into all the odds here, but Cleveland is up here, and then the Dodgers at 9-4. Then the Astros at 3-1. The Cubs at 6-1. The Nationals at 7-1, and the Yankees at 28-1, and the D-backs at 40-1 with the Red Sox. The American League pennant, 5-6, Cleveland. And then Houston, 5-4 odds there. The Yankees at 12-1, and the Red Sox at 16. Wouldn't be a hell of a bet if you got it. And to win the National League pennant, it's all Dodgers. They're 10-13. Anyway, and the Cubbies are 3-1. And then comes the Nationals, 7-2, and the D-backs, that'd be 25-1. They give an example down here. If you had a 20-1 bet, you put $100 down, and you would collect $2,100 on that bet. So you can get anything. 20-1, 25-1. You'd bet on the Arizona D-backs, throw down a C note of $100, and you'd be in pretty good shape. You'd also be in good shape with the Red Sox 16-1 there, or the Yankees 12-1, and that's basically where it is. And looking at all the Vegas odds there, it's basically look at all of these. I don't know. The Westgate, MGM, etc. They basically all favor the Nationals over the Cubs there. And if we go to L.A. And Arizona, L.A. is favored at all the houses there. The station, negative 12 anyway. And if we look at Houston and Boston, basically the same story here, that Houston is favored at all the houses. The win, wait a minute. Yeah. And finally, Cleveland and the Yankees. Well, not sure how this went, but anyway, Cleveland and I see 7.5. Anyway, so we basically have Cleveland favored. No. Yeah, Cleveland favored, not favored over the Yankees. Wait a minute, what the hell is going on here? A negative 165, negative 165, and a plus a 155. Oh, this is at 2 anyway. at and open. In other words, the other houses don't have any bets at all on them. This will nonetheless do it for us. There was one poll out, I believe that was Gallup today, had DJ Trump at 38 there. So that was pretty much that. This will do it for us. We'll go to the Sox. We'll entertain the Astros tomorrow, if they're not rained out. And, of course, you will have the Yankees, the second game in New York. These are must-win games for both of those. And then, of course, we have the National League, the Cubs and Nationals. Now, that is in Washington, D.C. And then we'll return if they're tied 1-1, so they will return to Wrigley Field. And the Dodgers and D-backs, now they're in Arizona. So we'll see. Mr. Cranky will be on the mound, we believe. And this will do it for us. Have a good week, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Good day from WBRN Radio.